So good afternoon everyone. My name is Maurya Hanspal, and in this session we are going to discuss something about a market crash. Market crash. So in the recent days, starting from the previous week, we witnessed a certain steep correction in the market. The Nifty it fell by more than 800 points, and the Sensex it fell by more than 2,500 points. That was something that was going around in the market. But when we talk about this market crash, people blame the market crash as just the Russia-Ukraine crisis. But is the Russia-Ukraine crisis the only thing that is resulting to the market crash? But are the other factors also come into place? So blaming only the Russia-Ukraine crisis is not only the best thing that one can do. And that is just a situation that is coming on the face of it. Because you are watching the news channels and like you are watching the geopolitical news and all that stuff. And on the face of it, it seems like it is just because of the Russia-Ukraine crisis that we are facing the market correction or the market crash, as some people call it. Presently, in my personal situations and my personal understanding, I do not feel that it's a market crash because ultimately the Sensex or the Nifty it cannot come back like once again at the prices like which were there before the COVID-19 pandemic. 40,000, 35,000 for Nifty and like 11,000, 12,000 for sorry. First one was for Sensex and like 11,000, 12,000 for Nifty. Okay. So market crash is something that can only come if this problem further escalates. Because of the Russia, it cannot come into the talks with the Ukraine and the other countries, and it further starts the process of bombarding and hampering the peace and harmony which it had already destroyed, like on the day of today and the previous days as well. The other countries might also come in between, be it your China, be it your USA, be it your England and other countries as well. And India can also come into the fray as well. So these problems can further create and escalate issues and create a World War III kind of situation which people are predicting. But that is a least case scenario which we feel. Because ultimately people have to interfere in between and restore peace and harmony, be it UN or anyone. Okay. But that is something we call it as a political concerns. And we are like not talking about the political concerns here. We are here to study about finance. And the reasons why the market is achieving a correction or witnessing a correction, or like as people call it as a market crash. See, when the market is correcting by around, or the market is coming down by around 10%, 20%, or max to max 25%, we people can call it as a correction. But when it goes down by more than 25%, we call it as a crash, which is still to happen. I'm not saying that it will happen, but it can happen if the problem further escalates and the various other countries come in between. So the first reason when we talk about the market crash is about the Russia-Ukraine crisis. And that is not the only reason, but one of the reasons, the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Because ultimately, it's an example of the geopolitical tensions. And when these kind of situations, be it a war or a recession, there is always a spillover effect on the other economies, or we can also call it as a contagion effect. So what do we mean by a spillover effect or a contagion effect? So it basically means that one economy is being hampered, either because of recession or some natural calamity, or be it a war kind of a situation, the other economies also get hampered. And why they get hampered? Because a large number of the commodities and trade, export import is being done by these countries. It can also hamper the payment mechanisms as well, as recently the sanctions were imposed on Russia for like removing some of the banks from the SWIFT system. SWIFT it does not transfer money. It is just a messaging system. Okay. So if the banks are not allowing this system to Russia, it can further hamper the problem and can reduce the banking income as well. So these kinds of geopolitical tension, it also puts up a premium on the which the cash flows of the companies are discounted. So completely agreed when the risk-free rate rises or the discount rate rises, as we can see in the case of the US potential Fed. It is about to increase the rate of interest, not by the 50 basis point because of these crises, but at least by like 25 to 30 basis points. So that gets figured out in the discount rate on the basis of which the cash flows are discounted ultimately. Because these kinds of premiums also get favored into, and further this risk premium also rises. Because discount rate it includes a component of the risk premium also. Okay. So that thing you must understand. So when this discount rate is rising or the risk premium is rising, ultimately the company would also be discounted at a lower value and the market would correct. So this is like one of the reason which we can see that the markets are facing a correction, because if one economy is not working well, or these kinds of situations, your recession, your natural calamity, or war is going on in one country, it will definitely affect the other country as well. And that you need to understand. And that we call it as a contagion effect or a spillover effect. One company is being hampered, and the effects are also witnessed and suffered by the other countries, which we are witnessing right now. Let's talk about the second reason. The second reason which we talk about is your valuations. Did market start to correct only after the Russia-Ukraine crisis came into news? No. The market had already started to correct even before that. And the main reason for that was of the excessive valuations. When the market is excessively valued, it can further create problems, because ultimately those companies which have no fundamentals or not even performing well, the prices of those companies will start to rise. And when the prices of such companies start to rise, it can create a large amount of problem for those companies as well, because these are not fundamentally strong. And a time would come when the prices of these companies would fall, because they'll have their quarterly earnings, they have their monthly earnings, or the yearly earnings. And at some point of time, people will get to know that the market was excessively valued, and these companies are not performing so well as compared to their earnings. Because ultimately, there must be a match between the earnings and the performance of the company. Where earnings must match with the sales of the company. Where earnings must match with the growth rate of the company. The growth rate must be matched, because if the EPS of a company is rising, the PE is also rising. It must also match with the growth rate as well. The growth rate, if the growth rate is just like 2%, 3%, but the PE is rising by 10%, 15%, be it the EPS also. So this there is a far difference, and in that case, the company can be overvalued as well. And it would be more benefit to stop your investments into those particular companies, or even withdraw some or all of your investments. See, I'm not saying that always invest in a value company. The company that is undervalued, you like try to pick up that companies and do your kind of valuations and understanding on those companies and pick that company. But it is not always also bad to buy a growing company. At least the growth rate must be able to justify the valuations. If the growth rate is being able to justify the valuations, it's completely fine. So then you people can go for that. But if not, it can create problems. Okay, so that you need to understand, like when we talk about all these things. Okay, so that is one thing you need to understand in a very nice way. So when you have excessive valuations, people drive this because we had something called the pent up demand. We had something called the pent up demand. Okay, and pent up demand is nothing that during the COVID-19, the people were not demanding a large number of things. But when this pandemic ended, or the wave came to a rest, a large number of things like people started to buy, be it electronics or other consumer discretionary items. So that's a pent up demand. People started to have revenge travel, as what we call it as the revenge travel, or the revenge tourism, because they wanted to travel for these 2 years, but they were not able to because of the COVID restrictions, as what we call it as the revenge travel. So all these things combined with people are buying any of the companies available in the market, like just buying any of the companies, and this we call it as the irrational exuberance. This we call it as the irrational exuberance, because people are buying any of the companies available in the market. The companies have no fundamentals, the companies have no earnings and nothing, but they're just buying because everyone else is buying. And that is also a concept of herd mentality, of which we talk about in behavioral finance or investor psychology. Okay, so that thing must be taken into consideration. That thing you have to talk about, you have to understand, because the market started to correct even before the Russia Ukraine crisis, because of the excessive valuations in the market, which drives the pent up demand, because people were not able to buy high luxury items or discretionary items, your electronics, your TV, fridge, and all these stuff. So that was the pent up demand basically. And the second thing was the revenge travel, because if you are not able to travel for the past 2 years and you are a traveler and you love to travel, it can create a problem for you. Okay, so at that time, a point will come when you would not be able to resist yourself, and you would go on and do traveling. It would be a revenge travel, and all driven by irrational exuberances. The other two